Number 18. Dodge Journey, 2009 to 2020. Introduced in 2009 on a platform already falling behind the segment, still on sale in 2020. 11 years unchanged, while Honda, Toyota, and Hyundai each released multiple generations of crossovers in the same space. The Journey's interior quality reflected a product frozen at a specific moment in Chrysler's development, never updated to match what competitors were putting in showrooms. Consumer Reports rated it poorly across most of its production run. Driving dynamics fell behind what segment buyers expected by 2012 and continued falling for another 8 years. Consumer Reports rated it poorly for reliability across most of its production run. The Journey is not here because it was a mechanical disaster. It is here because keeping an outdated product on sale for over a decade while competitors released successive generations around it became its own category of failure. Chrysler discontinued the Journey in 2020. By then, it had been outclassed for the better part of a decade, which is a long time for buyers to be sold something that the manufacturer's own competitors had already left behind. Chrysler Sebring, 2007 to 2010. In the most competitive sedan market in the American market, the Sebring asked buyers to trust that Chrysler had closed the quality gap with Honda and Toyota. The ownership record said otherwise. The 2.7-liter V6 proved unusually sensitive to maintenance neglect compared with competitors in the segment. The 2.7-liter V6 proved less tolerant of maintenance neglect than many competitors in the segment, and owners reported problems at rates that damaged the car's reputation. Interior quality fell measurably below the Accord and Camry. The automatic transmission also generated consistent complaints. Consumer Reports placed the Sebring near the bottom of its class across its production run. Its failure mattered beyond its own sales figures. It arrived at exactly the moment Chrysler needed buyers to believe the quality gap was closing. Every Sebring service visit was evidence it was not. The Accord and Camry buyers who considered the Sebring and chose otherwise had good reasons, and the ownership data from buyers who chose differently confirmed them across multiple consecutive model years. Number 16. AMC Gremlin, 1970 to 1978. Developed by shortening an existing platform on a budget too tight and a timeline too compressed for either to go unnoticed by owners. Rust advanced through the lower body and floor sections faster than buyers considered reasonable. Build quality varied between units in ways a new car should not produce. The rear suspension transmitted road imperfections with a directness that reflected how quickly the platform had been abbreviated for its new dimensions. The Gremlin sold for 8 years almost entirely on price. That 8 years says as much about the limitations of entry-level alternatives in the early 1970s as it does about the car's own merits. It is at number 16 because its failure was quiet and systemic rather than spectacular, which made it easier to normalize and harder to escape. Japanese manufacturers were demonstrating that an economy car did not have to make these compromises. Japanese manufacturers were already demonstrating that economy cars did not have to make these compromises. The Gremlin kept making them anyway and sold consistently on price alone to buyers who had fewer alternatives than the sales volume implies. Number 15. Chrysler LeBaron Convertible, 1987 to 1995. The Chrysler LeBaron convertible sold throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s as one of the most recognizable, affordable ragtops in the American market, a car whose combination of open-air driving and accessible pricing found an audience that its quality record struggled to justify. The LeBaron convertible was positioned as an attainable luxury experience, and its marketing communicated a lifestyle proposition that the interior materials and build quality did not consistently support. Electrical faults accumulated with a frequency that owners of a car in this price bracket did not consider acceptable, particularly in the convertible top mechanism, which required attention at intervals buyers found inconsistent with the car's purchase price. The 2.5-liter four-cylinder in base configuration delivered performance that made the car's sporting identity feel aspirational rather than achieved. Consumer Reports rated the LeBaron below average for reliability across its late production years. It sold a specific image, open roads, wind in the hair, and delivered an ownership experience that required considerably more dealer service time than the image had implied. Number 14. Renault Alliance 1983 to 1987. Motor Trend's Car of the Year for 1983. By 1986, Consumer Reports had withdrawn its recommendation entirely. Few falls from grace in American automotive history happened faster. The Alliance was a French platform assembled in Kenosha, Wisconsin, serviced through a dealer network not trained for it, with parts supply chains not prepared to support it. The throttle body failed consistently. Cold starts became unpredictable. Electrical faults in the French-sourced systems resisted diagnosis. Structural rust appeared within a few ownership years. The gap between launch enthusiasm and mid-ownership reality was wide enough that it became one of the clearest examples of what happens when a promising car meets an unprepared support structure and runs out of time to fix either. AMC's financial position made sustained quality improvement nearly impossible without Renault's continued investment, which the deteriorating product record made increasingly difficult to justify. Which is not an excuse, but it is an explanation for how a Car of the Year became a Consumer Reports warning within 3 years of launch. Plymouth Neon, 1994 to 1999. The Neon arrived with the most effective small car marketing Chrysler had produced in a decade. Cheerful identity, competitive price. The head gasket did not share the marketing team's enthusiasm. The 2.0-liter four-cylinder developed a pattern of head gasket failure across early production years, documented in sufficient volume to attract significant owner complaints and extended warranty attention. Repair costs in year 3 or 4 shocked buyers who thought a 5-year-old Neon should still be within normal service expectations. The situation improved in later production years. The buyers who purchased early examples absorbed the cost of a problem that should have been resolved before launch. Chrysler improved the head gasket situation in later production years, but early buyers absorbed costs that no warranty had clearly covered. The Neon's failure mattered beyond its own sales figures. It arrived at exactly the moment Chrysler needed buyers to believe the quality gap with Japan had closed. The head gasket pattern ensured that argument remained contested well into the car's production run. Number 12. DeLorean DMC-12, 1981 to 1983. The stainless steel body, the gull-wing doors, 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. That last number is the problem. The PRV V6, producing approximately 130 horsepower in U.S. specification, placed the DMC-12 in the same performance category as most family sedans of the era, while the body suggested something far beyond them. Low-clearance parking made the gull-wing doors impractical in the environments most likely to be frequented by someone who had just spent $25,000 on a car. Assembly at the Belfast factory produced significant variation between units in panel gaps, door alignment, and interior finish, inconsistencies difficult to justify at $25,000. Period road tests documented the relationship between the car's appearance and its mechanical reality with consistency. The DMC-12 survived as a cultural icon because its visual presence outlasted its ownership reality. As a cultural icon, the DMC-12 succeeded far more than it did as a sports car. As a car to own and drive in 1982, it was a different matter, one that period road tests communicated and buyers who purchased on the design alone discovered for themselves. Number 11. Cadillac Cimarron, 1982 to 1988. A Chevrolet Cavalier. Identical J-body platform, same 1.8-liter four-cylinder, and shared most of its underlying engineering. Fitted with leather seats, Cadillac badges, and a price that in some configurations was nearly double the Cavalier it was built from. The reliability record of the Cavalier platform, rated below average by Consumer Reports across the relevant production years, was included in the transaction whether buyers understood that or not. Period road tests identified the relationship between the two cars and documented the gap between what the Cadillac badge implied and what the mechanicals delivered. Road and Track and Car and Driver both tested the Cimarron against European entry luxury competitors, and the comparisons were not kind. It is here not only as a poorly executed product, but as evidence of what the most prestigious name in American automotive history was willing to sell when the economics required it. Cadillac's own management later identified the Cimarron as a strategic mistake, one of the few cases where a manufacturer subsequently agreed with its critics. Number 10. Chevrolet Citation, 1980 to 1985. Motor Trend Car of the Year, 1980. The same car that accumulated one of the most significant brake-related recall records of any American compact of the decade. The Citation was GM's front-wheel drive answer to the import challenge. The front disc brakes developed a documented tendency toward pull and fade under hard stops. NHTSA investigated. Multiple recall campaigns followed, covering brakes, fuel system, and engine-related issues. Consumer Reports withdrew its recommendation. The Citation's failure was a strategic setback, not just a product failure. It arrived in showrooms positioned as proof that GM could compete in the segment the Japanese were threatening to dominate, a front-wheel drive compact that Motor Trend had already validated with the most prestigious award in American automotive journalism. The X-Body program had been one of GM's most significant engineering investments of the era. The ownership record it produced was not that proof. NHTSA investigations, multiple recall campaigns, and Consumer Reports withdrawing its recommendation together constitute something more specific than disappointment. That is not a sentence about a marginal product. Number 9. Chevrolet Vega. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year in 1971. By 1974, owners were replacing engines. That gap is the Vega in 2 sentences. GM deployed an aluminum cylinder board design without the real-world validation ordinary driving would expose. Cylinder wear, overheating, and oil consumption appeared far earlier than buyers reasonably expected, on a car whose Car of the Year award had implied these were solved problems. The recall record covered axle, throttle, and engine-related issues across multiple separate campaigns over the production run. Rust consumed body panels and floor sections within 2 to 3 seasons in cold climates on cars purchased new. Consumer Reports tracked the Vega's reliability record across the production years and documented a pattern that improved slowly and inconsistently. More than 2 million units were sold. That scale transformed a niche engineering failure into a mass-market reliability crisis and shaped how a generation of American buyers understood what domestic manufacturers were capable of delivering when competitive pressure arrived before engineering validation had finished. Number 8. Pontiac Fiero, 1984 to 1986. The Pontiac Fiero caught fire, not a metaphor. Cars from the first 3 production years experienced engine fires at a rate significant enough to generate NHTSA investigations and a recall covering approximately 260,000 vehicles. Engine failures in the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder could allow oil to contact hot engine surfaces. In documented cases, those contacts produced fires. GM subsequently redesigned the engine compartment. The platform became more capable in later years, but the buyers who purchased the early cars had chosen a mid-engine sports car from an American manufacturer at an accessible price point, and in documented cases received an engine compartment fire instead. The car GM built afterward was better. The one those buyers purchased was not. For a manufacturer positioning the Fiero as evidence that America could build a credible mid-engine sports car, the fire record of the early production years was among the most damaging own goals of the decade. GM improved the car. The recall covered the early units.
but the 260,000 buyers who got there first had already experienced what the improvement was designed to prevent. Number 7. AMC Pacer, 1975 to 1980. The Pacer was designed around an engine that General Motors canceled before the car reached production. Everything else followed from that single decision. AMC had built the Pacer's proportions and weight distribution around a Wankel rotary. When GM withdrew that engine, AMC substituted the inline-six it had available. The mismatch shaped the entire ownership experience. The Pacer was wider than any American subcompact of its era, appropriate for the rotary, a fuel economy liability with the heavier six. The large glass surfaces created thermal and sealing issues documented consistently in owner service records. Build quality attracted persistent complaints. The Pacer is not on this list for being unusual. AMC marketed the Pacer as an innovation. It was, in one respect, the first American car of its era designed around an engine that would never arrive. It is here because it was built around an assumption that had been invalidated before the tooling was finished, and then sold to buyers for 5 years as if that assumption had never existed. AMC did not have the resources to start over. The buyers who purchased the result did not have the information to know that.
Number 6. Hummer H2, 2002 to 2009. The Hummer H2 was not a bad car in the way that most cars on this list were bad. It did not generate major safety recalls. Its reliability record was not the worst in its class. It is here for a different reason. It became one of the most visible symbols of an era in which image, size, and excess consistently outweighed practicality, efficiency, and everyday usability. The H2 used a standard GMT 800 truck platform, rather than the serious four-wheel drive hardware the military H1 it visually referenced actually used. Real-world fuel economy landed between 9 and 13 miles per gallon, figures that made operating costs a weekly financial commitment the $53,000 purchase price had not fully communicated. The urban parking geometry was genuinely impractical for the environments where most H2 owners actually drove. Consumer Reports rated it below average for owner satisfaction. Sales peaked in 2002 and declined as fuel prices rose. GM discontinued Hummer in 2010. The H2's core failure was not mechanical. It was that the image and the product never matched at a price and fuel cost the market eventually stopped accepting. Number 5. Pontiac Aztek, 2001 to 2005. GM's own executives reportedly voted against the Aztek's production design. It was produced anyway. That decision tells you most of what you need to know. Consumer Reports rated the Aztek below average for reliability, with complaints concentrated in electrical systems and powertrain components. It was built on a minivan platform, a compromise whose consequences for dynamics and interior proportions were visible from the first drive. Sales never approached projections. GM discontinued it in 2005 after fewer than 120,000 units across 5 model years. The Aztek exposed how disconnected GM's product planning had become from what buyers actually wanted, and did so publicly in showrooms through a car that had cleared every stage of the company's development process. That is a more damaging kind of failure than a bad engine. It means the system that should have caught the problem was part of the problem. The Aztek became a cultural shorthand for automotive misjudgment and earned that status through a 5-year production record that confirmed the initial critical response was not wrong. Yugo GV, 1985 to 1992. $3,990. The cheapest new car in the United States in 1985.
The buyers it attracted had limited financial margin for major repairs. The Yugo delivered them anyway. Built on a platform derived from a 1971 Fiat design, the Yugo produced approximately 55 horsepower and introduced owners to electrical faults, inconsistent build quality, and maintenance requirements that the purchase price had implied would not be their immediate concern. Two Yugos leaving the same factory could age like completely different cars. Parts availability deteriorated as Yugoslav political instability disrupted supply chains through the late 1980s. The Yugo's failure was not about performance. No buyer at that price expected European dynamics. It was about delivering unreliable basic transportation to buyers who needed reliable basic transportation and had no financial buffer when it failed. That specificity, this price, this buyer, this failure, is what places it here. The Yugo is remembered as a punchline. That reputation obscures the more specific story. It was aimed at buyers for whom a breakdown meant missing work, not calling a second car. For those buyers, the consequences were real.
Number 3. Ford Explorer, 1991 to 2001. The best-selling SUV in America for most of the 1990s, the primary family vehicle for millions of households. That scale of adoption is exactly what made what followed so consequential. The safety crisis that became public around 2000 and 2001 centered on Firestone tires fitted to Explorer models experiencing tread separation, in combination with the Explorer's handling characteristics, contributing to rollovers resulting in deaths and serious injuries. NHTSA investigations and congressional hearings produced extensive documentation of what each company knew and when. Responsibility was publicly disputed between Ford and Firestone, but the rollover record became inseparable from the Explorer's reputation. What investigations later revealed about how long the warning signs had existed, that is what places the Explorer here. The documentation that emerged showed warning signs accumulating in data long before the public reckoning of 2000 and 2001. Few vehicles in American history had been trusted by more families for more ordinary daily decisions, and the scale of that trust made the subsequent record proportionally more significant than the raw numbers alone would suggest. Number 2. Ford Pinto, 1971 to 1980. What separates the Ford Pinto from every other car on this list is not the fuel tank design. It is what the documents showed about the decision-making that preceded it. The Pinto was developed in under 25 months. Internal crash testing showed that the fuel tank could rupture and ignite in certain rear impact scenarios. An internal Ford cost-benefit analysis, later revealed through civil litigation, compared the per-unit cost of a design fix against projected settlement cost for anticipated deaths and injuries. Few automotive scandals produced documentation so explicitly comparing the cost of preventing deaths against the cost of settling for them. The analysis became public through civil litigation and shaped how the Pinto was understood, not just as a flawed product, but as a decision. Ford recalled approximately 1.5 million Pintos in 1978 and was indicted in Indiana on reckless homicide charges, one of the first such prosecutions of an American manufacturer over a product design decision. For decades, the Pinto represented the darkest example of corporate decision-making in American automotive history. Number 1. Chevrolet Cobalt, 2005 to 2010. The airbags failed after the engine shut off. That mattered because the engine could shut off while the car was moving. The ignition switch defect in the Cobalt allowed the key to move out of the run position under certain conditions, cutting engine power and disabling airbags simultaneously. Internal GM documentation later showed that awareness of the defect existed within the company years before the recall was issued in 2014. Congressional investigations produced records establishing the timeline. The recall covered 2.6 million vehicles.
GM's compensation program linked the defect to 124 deaths, though independent analyses produced higher figures. The Cobalt is at number 1 because unreliability at its most serious is not measured in repair bills. It is measured in the distance between the date a problem was identified and the date the recall was issued, and in every vehicle that remained on the road while that distance accumulated. That distance, in this case, was for many years before the recall was issued. The Cobalt is at number 1 because it revealed what happens when a known safety problem meets an institutional process that keeps it from becoming a recall.